What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Erik Rubadeau, and he is the founder of Yeeboo Digital. And Erik, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes of the podcast people should check out. There's a really good one with John Morris. He built up an agency to over 200 people, then sold it. Then he started a software in the agency space for agencies to make better decisions, called Engine BI. It's enginebi.net. Check the episode out. Really interesting how he walked through the journey of the agency and then selling. Another good one, Erik and I were talking about how important it is to streamline operations and businesses, and he helps nonprofits do that through technology, which we'll get to in a second. But Adi Clevitt was on, and we geeked out on our favorite software tools, productivity tools, and technology. And she is an agency that goes into organizations and helps map out their SOPs. So that's all she does. They come in, she's like, we need to map out these SOPs, and she's a done for you service to map out SOPs so they can streamline operations, client onboarding, staff onboarding, or whatever it is. And that was a really good episode as well. And Kevin Hurrigan was another one. He runs Spinia Tech, and Erik, he had an agency since 1995. So it was interesting to hear the landscape of business, the internet, and agency life in the mid-90s till today. So that was a really cool one. So check those out and more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise25. At Rise25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. How do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do the accountability, the strategy, and the full execution. So we call ourselves kind of the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the company and the host so they can develop amazing relationships and, most importantly, run their business while creating great content, of course. So the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships, and I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And we're happy to answer anything that you have through our way. I'm excited to introduce Erik Rubadeau. He's a 20-year veteran of the digital agency space. He bootstrapped the Yeeboo Digital agency from the ground up with the single focus of helping nonprofit organizations harness the power of digital to help them achieve their mission. Oftentimes, we'll talk about the sector, Erik, I know, understaffed, overworked. So how do you streamline these things so you can focus on the highest and best use of your time? Well, they help you do that. They've worked with organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, Canada, Save the Children, and many, many more. Erik, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
So talk a little bit about Yeeboo Digital and what you do. And as you do that, there's a video piece to this. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to pull up Yeeboo Digital.
All right, cool. Thank you. Yeeboo Digital, as you sort of said or alluded to, we're a digital agency and we focus specifically in the nonprofit sector. All of our clients are organizations that are trying to, really achieve and grow with digital. So, from our perspective, there's so much potential in digital. And, I guess I come from a background of taking things apart my whole life. So, for me, the idea of digital, the power of it, I used to build computers when I was a kid. I'm fascinated by that kind of thing. And I fell into this sector kind of by accident. And when I started working in the nonprofit sector, I realized, there's so much good work happening here. And this is back in like 2004 or 5. There was so much great work happening, but digital really wasn't a big part of the scene. And so, over the last 20 years, I've been kind of fortunate, I guess, to work on amazing projects with organizations, but really focused around, digital first. How do we, how do we leverage technology to make organizations' lives easier? Because what I was seeing was technology making organizations' lives worse. So we've built our agency kind of first and foremost on our expertise in the technology platforms. Whether that's the in-sector ones like Blackbot or Engaging Networks, or the sort of marketing platforms, Google, Facebook, TikTok, etc. Because as we grew and kind of perfected this technology first, this kind of technology infrastructure projects, if you will, expertise, helping organizations with their ECRMs, their email marketing tools, donation forms, websites, all that kind of stuff. What we realized is that, once we've got them set up from an infrastructure perspective, there's the campaigns to run, there's the marketing work to do, there's the support that they need for the technology, and then there's the strategy. So we've ended up kind of with these 4 points, infrastructure projects, which is sort of described are these like underpinnings, if you will, right? The ECRMs, the tools, the websites, but we also have a campaigns and email marketing team, do a lot of digital media buying to help organizations get their name out and connect with people. We also have a support services team, which basically is reactive support. It's capacity enhancement for organizations because, as we've trained organizations on the tools that they've purchased and got them all set up, it's inevitable that someone leaves and there's this gap, whether that's a gap with the current team or whether that's a gap left by someone who's leaving. So we've ended up with this support services team that's focused on helping organizations with capacity enhancement. And then lastly, all of this is wrapped together with strategy, right? How do we get the most out of technology? Do we have the right technology in-house now? So it's technology strategy, it's growth strategy, it's digital strategy. And a lot of it is very much focused around helping organizations, raise revenue so they can change the world. Our mission here is to change the world, but we're not the ones doing it. Our goal is to change the world by helping the organizations that we work with actually go out and change the world.
Talk about the niche for a second. I'm always intrigued by, so how did you get into nonprofit?
Yeah. So I have a degree in political science, clearly. When I came out of university, I had a 7 or 8 year career working in forestry as a forest firefighter for the BC Forest Service. But I wanted to kind of switch gears and apply my degree. So I moved to Toronto.
So you
with
were
my girlfriend.
fighting forest fires.
Yeah, that was my previous life.
So what was the scariest story from that?
I have been in 3 helicopter crashes. That is a part of the job they don't tell you is sort of more of a regular occurrence, if you will. Probably the scariest one. Most of them were kind of small scale, like lower to the ground. We had a door rip off a helicopter flying home late one night, kind of pushing the edges of grounding. And these machines are, some of them we're flying in are from the 70s, the 60s, like Vietnam War era machines. And they're still super functional. They're great, but they are machines, right? And so we're humming along, sun is setting, and then just in the split second, the door rips off. And all credit to our pilot, honestly. I think his name was Max. Had the machine on its side before I even realized the door had ripped off, because the door that ripped off, if we had stayed straight, it would have gone right through the tail rotor and we would have just spun to the ground and crashed. Incredible, and those are the things you just kind of becomes normalized, I guess, when you work in that space. But yeah, when you kind of get away from
after the first helicopter crash, you're like, I'm out. This is enough for me. You endure 2 more.
Yeah, you know what it is when there's enough people around you who are like, oh, it's okay, hey, that was, we're all alive, everything's good. You kind of like, okay, yeah, all right, this is normal, right? So, it's a bit of a different life. But when people say, hey, you run an agency, you put out fires, I say, well, it comes from previous career.
There's nothing like
fires,
what I did
guess,
before.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So,
wow, puts things in perspective a little bit. So you do that, and then what was next?
Yeah, well, so, I thought, I'm going to apply this degree. So I moved to Toronto with my then girlfriend, now wife, and we, got a little apartment, and I was going to go and apply to work in the Foreign Service. That was my plan. So I was writing my Foreign Service exams. I was kind of going through that process. And I ended up volunteering with an organization called Journalists for Human Rights. Just kind of saw they needed help. had time on my hands. I was sort of just kind of gainfully unemployed for a little bit after working all summer, and thought, it'd be great to work for an organization. So I started working with them, and this was in the closet in a helicopter office in Rosedale. I think the Ben Peterson, the guy who started the organization, had a connection and got us the space. But I just did a little bit of everything for the year that I was there. I helped throw an event, a fundraising event. I helped with the website. I got the first direct mail package out the door. Just things. I called every single person who'd ever been to their events and asked them if they wanted to be a donor. Just all of these things that I had never experienced before, but I was just trying to help the organization out as I was going through the process. That ended up that I met someone who, I'm trying to forget exactly how it happened, but I met someone who was working in an agency, and that agency was focused specifically on helping nonprofits with technology and digital. And I was like, this is cool. And so I applied, I got the job, and I started there. I think there was 4 of us when I started and about 15 people when I left. And it was one of those sink or swim, every day was something totally new, because it was early 2000s, trying to help organizations leverage the internet, right? It was not quite MySpace, but, we were coming out of that era, right? It was just, email marketing was just taking off. So, online donations were really just starting. So it was kind of an interesting place, an interesting time. We had a lot of stuff that we did not know what we were doing, but it's an amazing place to work from that perspective. And, a lot of people in our sector who are out there doing great things spent some time there.
It was interesting how you first got started and launched your agency. It sounded like you didn't intend to even start an agency.
Nope. No, absolutely not. It was, I didn't intend to work in agencies. I didn't intend to be in the space. I have a half-finished foreign service exam somewhere floating around with the government. Maybe I'll do that when I retire. Who knows? But yeah, I had a client, an ex-client of mine who we'd worked together for years when she was at Doctors Without Borders. She left there, ended up at Covenant House International, a bunch of months later, and kind of called me on a Friday and just said, hey, I would love to work with you again. Would you consider stepping away from where you're working and kind of doing your own thing and joining me? And I sort of said, well, I'd give it some thought. And she said, okay, well, the only hitch is I need to know on Monday. At that point, I just thought, I've been here for 5 or 6 years. I can always go back to, working at another agency, or even back to this one. But Molly Elliott was the woman, and she'd just been a really great mentor to me in our, even though I was the agency, she was the client. She just had, she had a great outlook on things, but also just a great strategic mind, and really loved working with her. So I just thought, this is a cool opportunity to go and do something different. So I worked with Covenant House International as an external, agency, if you will, agency of one, for about 4 or 5 years. And in that time, we, shifted. She ended up leaving the organization about 1.5 years later, and it was a bit of a shift up. And I worked with Drugs for Neglected Disease Initiative for a little while, and then went back to working with Covenant House. And it was just one of those things. You get to a point where there's enough work in the day, and then you realize you're like, I was young, I was really enjoying what I was doing. I was probably putting in 12 hours a day. And then when, you start to realize there's enough time in a day for somebody else to be helping me. My wife left what she was doing at the agency, joined me, and we kind of were 2 of us for a bit, and then we hired a third, and then, kind of rolled from there. So we ended up, we're now a team of 20.
I want to hear about some of the key hires, Erik, but stick on the Covenant House International for a second, because, was initially, did you know, okay, this is just launching in, this is going to be full-time work? Like when they're like, we need you here, is this going to be, did you realize it was going to be like 10, 12-hour days? Or were you thinking, okay, I can maybe handle this project while keeping my job?
No, I mean, I don't know if I really, in all honesty, I don't want to say I'm impulsive, but I follow my intuition. And I just had this feeling. I was like, no, I should be doing this. This seems like the right thing to be doing right now. When I can't see a reason why not, I do. And I couldn't see a reason why not. So, I just jumped in with both feet. I had a chance to talk with my wife about it and say, am I nuts? And she said, nah, you go on, try it out. You never know, right? So, I knew there would be lots to do, based on my conversations with Molly. And it wasn't even that work that ended up really being the big piece. It was a couple years later, in that relationship, where we started with a program that was called Sleep Out, which at the time was focused on like high school students, sort of like, the 24-hour famine concept, right? Like trying to get students to sort of understand and do an experiential. And it was the concept, which, some people might be familiar with now, but it was focused on just getting kids to sleep out for the night. Hey, here's your sleeping bag and your cardboard box. You're going to raise a little bit of money and, do this experience sleeping out together, kind of, at the school or whatever.
Was it actually outside or what? Yeah.
Yep. Yep. But it wasn't really taking off for the organization. And so, we had a number of internal meetings just talking around, what do we do with this? Everybody kind of loved the concept, but couldn't quite figure out what to do with it. And Covenant House International is interesting. They're based right, downtown Manhattan, and they have so many powerful relationships, high executives, CEOs, like these really strong relationships. And we started exploring this idea, like, do you think executives would do this, right? Like, because the whole point is we need to raise money, and high school students are great, but like, they're raising $40 at a time, right? What if we could get CEOs to do this? And so, yeah, we put it together, we pitched it, we took it live. The first year we raised about I think just shy of $500,000 in the first year, got about 20, 30 CEOs to kind of come out and sleep in a cardboard box in the parking lot of the shelter, downtown Manhattan. And that was the beginning of that. For the next 4 or 5 years, that was a cornerstone piece of work for us and our agency as we grew, because that program blew up. I think we were raising $26 million a year by the time, we went off and did other things and they went another way. So, it was a really cool program to be part of, especially from that kind of ground up, like it was just myself and Carla Chadwick at the time at the organization who was really kind of driving that boat, and a few other people at the organization. And it just started to snowball. And then it was like, oh, okay. Then it was like, now it was in other cities and we had it running, then we had different iterations of it. We had, so it's really cool to see something like that and be part of something like that really goes kind of meteoric, because, for every Sleep Out, for every ice bucket challenge, there's organizations throwing stuff at the wall and it is just not sticking, so it's really cool to be part of something that really blows up like that.
Well, what's interesting, Eric, about it is it's like almost like a just shift of who's doing it. Like it's like the same concept, but like high school students and CEOs, and that one shift makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
You remember some of the experience shares and takeaways that some of these people, CEOs, had?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to to listen to their stories, and like they're not just sleeping out, they're spending the whole, they're doing a real experience, right? They're spending the evening at the shelter, they're listening to kids talk about how they ended up there, what Covenant House means to them, and it's really interesting, when to hear. To see the change, right? To see and to watch the change happening in people's minds as they go from thinking like, oh yeah, these kids are, they just ended up here because they made bad decisions. It's like, no, they ended up here because life was unfair to them in a lot of ways. And they, just didn't have the choice. A lot of these decisions were made for them and, ended up where they ended up. So, I think it's really interesting to see, to see how an organization and experience like that can really change. And it was cool because, year over year, you'd see these CEOs coming back and doing it and bringing their friends. And it was really neat to see kind of how it grew both in locations, but also just in the actual, like, I think, some years they were, for air quotes, selling out, right? Like there was no more space to accomplish without, while still keeping the experience authentic. So I think it was really cool to kind of be part of that and to witness that change in opinion, if you will.
I feel like there should be like some reality show where they do a swap, like for a week, like these people get to stay in their Manhattan apartment.
Yeah.
And then they have to stay on the street.
That'd be wild.
And it's like, I'm not leaving your apartment. This is nice here.
Yeah, you have it pretty good. I'm probably not going to leave.
No, that's pretty. Thank you for sharing that. So people want to check out the work that's being done. They just go to Covenant House International. Yeah.
The Covenant House Sleep Out. Yeah, I think it's in a number of cities and all across the US and Canada now. So it's really great. It's good. It's a great fundraiser for that organization.
So you start off as just you, then you rope your wife into this. Okay. Yep. In a good way. What were some of the first key hires along the way that you look back and go, oh my God, we really needed that. Maybe we should have done it 2 years prior.
Yeah. The first hire and it's funny, the first hire we made, she's still with us. And we hired, what we knew we needed was a little bit of everything. So she had a bit of design, she had a little bit of, light code, but mostly she was just open to, seeing what happened. And at that stage of an organization, of an agency, you just need that multiple hat type person, right? So she was kind of an extension of the work I was doing, which I think just gave me a little bit more space. And the hire we made after that was a developer, because we were doing so much work in the code, and I was a self-taught developer, so I was good to a point. But bringing Kevin on at the time was, it really upped our game. We could build custom things. We could really, kind of solution. My brain is a bit of a problem solver, if you will. I learned last year that I'm something called a chaos pilot, apparently. But I tend to really, there's no as far as I'm concerned. There's always a way. And having access to someone who is willing to, like with Kevin as an example, to just, build my crazy ideas, if you will, like, hey, it would be amazing if we could make something do this, for this organization. So that was pretty pivotal in a way. And then after that, the next big hire was, we had a couple more people join the team, but it's probably Matt Barr, who's our director of operations. He is the yin to my yang, if you will. People sometimes get both of us on the phone and go, how do you guys even work together? Because he's so calm and organized, loves to establish process and, all those things. And I am the inverse of that. I am, kind of accidentally or by intention running around lighting fires, all over the place. But he operationalizes the things that come out of my head in a way that I never could, right? So, one of the things I remember reading early on was, hiring for your weaknesses, right? Like, don't try to replace people with the things you're already good at. Hire people to fill in the gaps that are holding you back. And Matt was definitely one of those people, and still is, absolutely. And so, he joined when we were about 5 or 6 people, and has, really been through the transition with us as we kind of grew up to where we are right now.
Yeah, Erik, it reminds me, I had Mark Winters on talking about rocket fuel. He wrote with Gino Wickman, and they talked just about the visionary and integrator. And that creates the rocket fuel, right? You need the person like you, like the visionary. I'm just like, what if we could do this? And you also need the person who's going to put all the proper operations and systems behind it. So
yeah, exactly.
Totally get it. With that, what would you, if someone's like, you know what, Erik, I need a director of operations. I need someone like that. What are some of the attributes looking back that you would say, okay, here's what I'm looking for if someone's like, yeah, I want to hire that position?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a critical position from my perspective, especially for me, because it's such a weakness of mine. Like, hiring for that role was so critical. And when I think about the attributes, it is someone who is willing to hear you're crazy, right? And actually say, okay, not dismiss it, not, it's not that, Matt challenges me on all kinds of things, and that's really healthy. But, he's willing to roll with a lot of my crazy and say, okay, well, if you can explain to me what that process would look like, how we, what the outcomes are, I will try to operationalize it. So someone who has that translating mind that can take, the sort of big, hairy, loose ideas and probe the questions at me so that he can find, where are the holes, where are the things we have to be thinking about, who's going to do this work, what's the profitability of this work, all these kind of things, right? So yeah, it's very much someone who's willing to kind of, and has the skill set to do that translation. But but they have to want to be organized. They have to want to, kind of oversee, the running, if you will, of the organization. And that's really the role that Matt has stepped up into over time. Has gone from just, kind of being kind of a, super project manager to creating our project management team to really overseeing how the business runs operationally. So I think I probably got dumb lucky in some ways. I kind of knew what I was looking for. And Matt actually had come out of the same agency that I had been at before, had taken a year off and was traveling. And someone sort of said, "Oh, well, Matt's back." And I caught him just before he had accepted another job. Actually, I think he might have accepted another job at the moment I hit him. But, I think it is that, it's the organizational skills, but it's also it's the timeliness, it's the ability to understand how all of these pieces work. Because, as an agency grows and gets more complicated, they have to be, Matt's role is to actually see everything that's going on and be able to say, okay, we're under capacity here. Yes, we can take that project on. No, we can't take that project on. Hey, we don't have the people in the month of March to do the thing that you want to sell, right? Or the organization you want to work with. So, it's that reality. And he's been through a lot with us as we've grown.
I want to, Erik, we talked about niche and how you got in the niche. We talked about hires and a little bit of evolution of that. I want to talk about the services side and the evolution of the services. And, when I look at your page, you do a lot of different things. I know you started with the Covenant House International. What did kind of evolution of what you offer as an agency look like?
Yeah, I think people are sometimes surprised to hear the breadth of what we do, because I think, traditionally an agency might hyper focus in on one thing or kind of do everything. And we're somewhere in the middle. I think everything that we have starts from that kind of expertise in the technologies, right? Our sector, the nonprofit sector, has a bunch of kind of nonprofit technologies that are kind of unique to our space. And over time, the Salesforces and some of these other tools are coming in as well. But, certainly early on, it was all very, proprietary to the sector technologies. And we spent a lot of time, getting great at those technologies, really understanding how to push them, training our team on them, because, as you sort of alluded to earlier, nonprofit organizations are usually strapped for the time, everybody's running at 120%. So, it's rare that someone has the time to say, hey, I'm really going to, spend the next 2 weeks and learn this software inside out so we can maximize its use. So that's really where everything started for us, was kind of that underpinning of, expertise in technology. But as we rolled these technologies out to organizations, as we started, kind of training and, handing our motto was very much teach the organization to fish, right? Implement the new technology, train the people that are going to be using it. We started to see these other issues, So I've always been fascinated by marketing and really the trackability of marketing, the analytics, the sort of making decisions and testing things to see how people respond, the sort of human psychology of it. And so that marketing and fundraising side, which is kind of, wraps around the work that we do, as we implemented these technologies, we started to just see that organizations needed support in this space. So we started supporting with campaigns. We started supporting with email marketing, things that were adjacent to the work that we were doing, certainly, because it was just the next level, right? We were experts on the platforms. Of course, we can set up and send your email. We can, load your ads, that kind of stuff. So we learned a lot of stuff along the way. And I should say that my wife came from the for-profit agency side and then into the nonprofit space, but from a media buying perspective. So she kind of had that angle already. So it was just sort of natural for us to expand into that space. From there,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, from there, we expanded into the support services work that we do, which is very much about helping organizations with capacity enhancement. It's this sort of, hey, we've lost this person, or we need the continuity or want the continuity to be able to manage our tools and our digital universe, regardless of who's in the chair, right? So, we worked with organizations for years. Some of our longest standing relationships are support service relationships where, we support the organization. They might only need half a developer and a little bit of a designer and, a little bit of strategy here and there, because they've got people internally that can, for the most part, make a lot of stuff hum. But they can lean on us for things that they don't have. And if that person leaves, well, we have the knowledge of the way the organization works. We have logins to their tools. We can keep the trains running, so to speak, while they hire, because it's very rare that there's actually crossover in the nonprofit sector. Someone leaves, and then there's usually 3 to 6 months of gap in that role, and then that person has to train up. So you can spend a year, you can lose a year when a person leaves the organization to just forward momentum. So we can provide that stability for that forward momentum, and then even be part of the hiring process, reviewing job descriptions and saying, yeah, this is kind of the person you need, and then even being part of their train up when they join the organization. And then we go back to supporting that person in their day to day, and then all of that is wrapped in our strategy work.
So, Eric, what's an example where, because you mentioned, we help the technology side make their lives easier. What would be a good example of that with one of the organizations you worked with?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of examples, but I can think of the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. CAMH is an organization we worked with for a number of years. They have a product, Blackbaud product called Luminate Online, and they didn't really feel like they were getting the most out of it. They just didn't, have the they had people internally that had set it up. They'd been working with another agency. But, as we came into working with them, we just saw a lot of opportunity, ways that we could be, streamlining things. Some of these tools are really flexible in terms of how they can be set up. And so you can see the way that something gets set up can really impact the way that you have to continue to use it. So we worked with that organization on changing a bunch of different processes to just streamline the way they use the tool. Similar to Sick Kids, Sick Kids had TeamRaiser, which is a peer-to-peer software for, like the run, walk, ride, kind of the engine behind that. And we worked with them for a year just to sort of facilitate internal change around, what is it that they need to do, what they're trying to do, and is this the right tool for them, and, spend a lot of time just getting everybody bought into the direction, and then help them on board with the technology and really, change the way that they're ultimately doing, their peer-to-peer events, and have helped them with, implement their do-it-yourself fundraisers, their e-commerce, which I think is what we're looking at here. And again, all on the same platform, technology that they'd already purchased, but just didn't have the expertise in-house to know what was possible. So we worked with them, over the course of a couple of years to really just, and still do, here and there as things come up. So, a lot of these organizations buy technology, and, I don't think this is anyone's particular fault, but I don't think organizations they don't have the internal expertise a lot of the times to know what they're buying and how that fits their needs. This might be the first time anyone in that organization has ever bought software, right? So and you can bet your bottom dollar that every software company is putting forward their best, pitch, right? So they're kind of, choosing that. And then when the rubber hits the road, they realize that, technology doesn't really solve anything on its own. It's about the people that you train and the people that, buy into this, and, they have to know how to use it and how it fits into their business processes and their workflows and all that kind of stuff. So, I think as we work with organizations, we get a chance to really break that apart and help them kind of rebuild the way that they work with technology. And that's really a lot of fun.
With Sick Kids in this instance, I'm curious, what's the pain point they came to you with? I mean, are they saying, well, we just aren't raising enough? Or are they saying, we're confused by the software? What are they saying to you? And then when you look under the hood, you're like, oh my God, you're using like 1% of this. What are they coming to you with?
Yeah. So this example here, so an e-commerce site. So, there's a number of different ways that organizations fundraise. Most organizations raise a lot of their money in the last kind of quarter of the year. And there's a trend for organizations to have these kind of alternative, they're called kind of like an alternative gift catalog, but like essentially an e-commerce catalog, but it's just another way of donating. And Sick Kids really wanted to lean into that and was already paying for the Luminate Online platform, which had that functionality baked into it. So, what they wanted to do is kind of say, hey, we see this opportunity. We know we've got the software, but when we look at the software, we don't know what to do. We don't know how to configure it. It's a blank white page when it loads. Can you help us, kind of bring this vision to life? And so that's what we did in that case. And so we did that a lot with organizations. They might have already bought the software. They own it, but they're not getting the most out of it, or it's they don't know what's possible, right? So when you log into a piece of software, and if it's quite powerful and you don't know how to use it, it can become frustrating. And your natural instinct is to say, well, it's the software's problem. This software sucks. It doesn't do what I need. And the number of facilitations that we've run over the years where we're like, okay, well, let's take it all off the table and let's just say, like, what do you need? And we go through that process, and everybody lists out all the things they need and what they want, and then we put the software on the table and we say, okay, well, this is what it does. And they go, oh, really? I didn't know it could do all of these things, right? Because that's just, they didn't have the expertise internally to be able to kind of evaluate the software properly. And something I try to remind my team all the time is that when we're engaging with clients, like, we do this stuff every day, right? Like, we'll launch 10 websites a year. We'll roll out customizations to 50 different organizations on 10 different software over the course of a year. Most average nonprofit professionals would do that once in their whole career, right? So it's like, we see things from a very different angle, and we have to remember that, like, our clients don't necessarily even know what's possible. So you really have to have that patience and try to level set and educate as we go.
I love hearing some of these use cases, Erik, because I think it applies. I mean, it really applies to any business, not just nonprofits in this situation. I was listening to there's a Michael Senoff has hard to find seminars, and I was listening to someone who, an interview, he makes $1 million a year at a fruit stand, right? So things like,
awesome.
How does a fruit stand have anything to do with, but it was all the same principles and concepts of any business for that matter. Mm-hmm. And so I love hearing about this, and I would love for you, I know you worked with Habitat for Humanity. So if you want to talk a little bit about the work you did with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We, Habitat for Humanity, again, had Luminate Online at the time. I think they still do. And had reached out to us because, we were, I'm assuming someone recommended them. So we'd started a kind of a nascent relationship, just supporting some of their kind of back end stuff, sort of that infrastructure piece, right? Like, they had a couple of people working on the fundraising, and we were really just, helping set up donation forms and helping ship email and that kind of stuff. And as we got closer to the organization and spent more time with the team, there was just so much potential, so much opportunity. And, they were doing great work, but there was just two of them, and they were running full speed, so we started to talk about other things we could be doing, right? We could be, like, when you breaking down digital, like e-commerce for nonprofits is actually, there's so many metrics, but when you kind of focus in on the three key metrics, we call these kind of our Polaris metrics. It's traffic, right? How many people are coming to your site, getting to your thing. It's conversion rate, right? How many of those people are doing the thing you want them to do? And then when we're talking about fundraising, it's average gift, right? Why does someone give $150 instead of $50? And so we started to look at all of these pieces across the organization, right? Like, where's the traffic coming from? What are they doing? Could we be driving more traffic, right? So we started supporting them in putting out paid media and supporting their email marketing efforts. We became part of their strategy conversations for digital. So over the course of 4 or 5 years, we really became this kind of key. We had this really trusted relationship with the organization on everything digital, and we went through COVID with them, and, saw so many pivots and, wild things that were happening because, as an organization, they had a lot of different fundraising vehicles. They have builds, obviously, right? Well, those stopped. They had, overseas builds. Those stopped, corporate donations, everything went kind of tight. So we were coming up with a lot of these different unique ways of kind of putting the organization out into the universe and connecting with individuals in a time when, a lot of the other parts of the business were really, either on pause or really suffering. And so it was really cool to have been in that place where we'd been doing the groundwork. We'd kind of had, we'd we had a humming email marketing file. We had a group of donors who really cared about the organization. And when we got into that tight space in COVID, it was beautiful to see how those people responded, because we had put the infrastructure in place to build that audience and create that, cultivate that relationship.
What are some ways? I love how you laid that out, kind of the traffic piece, and you look at all the things under that conversion rate piece, and then average gift or order value piece.
Yeah.
What have you seen that's worked throughout the years of, I don't know if there's any examples on how people increase their average gift value?
I mean, one of there's a few sweet, short, short and sweet ways. First off, it's just pre-selecting the value, right? Like if you pre-select 20 on a donation array, you'd be surprised how many people give you a $20 gift. If you pre-select 100, well, maybe that's too rich for some people, but they're not going to fall all the way to 20. So, there's just little strategies like, pre-selecting the average gift, highlighting it, but then also, there's things like speaking to the power, right? Like what is, the sort of like the symbolic reference, right? Like what does $150 actually do for the organization, right? Is it 3 meals? Is it, medical kits? Like what are those? And for some organizations, that's really easy, to sort of quantify. And for others, it's a lot more complicated. And so they have to get really creative about how they quantify their work. But people really, they like that. They like to understand the impact, and then, more recently, you're seeing things like, product like Fundraise Up has come to market in the last few years. They're using things like, AI in the background, looking at, postal code locations and trying to make, predictions about, people's, propensity to give and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of things that are kind of bubbling up now that are brand new, ways of thinking about the same problem. But ultimately, it's about putting the right, you've been able to do this with some of the software for years, but it's really about saying, hey, if I've given $2,000 to your organization and, in a gift previously, when you send me to a donation form from an email, don't preload $20. I gave you a $2,000 gift, like dynamic gift arrays, using technology. And these things are baked into the tools that organizations have. It's just that a lot of the times they don't have the expertise or the time to sort of invest into, getting the most out of it. But if you can make a conditionalized offer to someone and say, hey, here's $1,500, $2,000, and $2,500, because they traditionally give you $2,000, that makes a lot more sense than offering them the standard 20, 50, 150, 200, right? And just like that, you're personalizing the relationship, but you're also, maximizing your potential revenue.
Yeah, I love what you said there about quantifying the work and helping them understand the impact. Again, that kind of applies to any business. If you can actually explain what it's going to do for them, obviously it's showing the value and the benefits instead of some of the features. So,
yep.
Erik, first of all, thank you. I have one last question. But I do want to tell people, if you want to learn more, you can check out yeeboodigital.com. Obviously, if you're watching the video, you've seen the website. It's YEEBOO digital.com to learn more. My last question, Erik, is about just business mentors. Who's helped you throughout your career on the business front? I know we all don't get where we're at without the help of others. Who are some of and it could be colleagues as well, some people in the industry that have given you good advice and lessons throughout your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, funny enough, my dad, who would not say he's contributed to this, but he was an entrepreneur growing up. I watched him build a number of businesses, both successful and some that plummeted.
What did he do?
And the thing that I took away from the way that he operated was, it's just, like you can always make another dollar. There's, you have to try, you have to learn, but he's a constant learner. He's someone who's always, he's got his nose in the manual for whatever. It's kind of where I guess where I come from. I grew up with a basement full of computer parts, and, he had arcade units and all this kind of stuff when I was a kid. Also ran a music store and, all these other things. And so I've watched him kind of just not be afraid to take that step, but also to put in the work to learn something. And so, I think that although he's never explicitly given me advice about how to run a business, I learned a lot from watching him. And I think that I've applied a lot of that. And then certainly, Matt is a great example. Matt and I have been through a lot as the business has grown. We've learned to budget together. We've learned to forecast. We've learned, we've hired a part-time CFO team that's supported us over the years. So, Matt has been through a lot with me, and has certainly been a big part of, what I've been able to, what we've been able to accomplish as an agency. And I think, as I look out, the probably one of the things that's been most helpful, is some of the work of Vern Harnish. That's how you say his last name.
Yeah, I've had him on the podcast before.
Yeah, I thought I heard that.
Scaling up.
Scaling up. A friend of mine who's in a totally different sector, venture capital kind of space, was like, "Oh, you should read this book," and kind of gave it to me. And I read it, and I was like, "Oh, it's the application of common sense across every part of the business." And it's such a cool way of thinking about things. And so certainly, those types of books over the years have been great. But yeah, I think as the business has grown, I've had to kind of regrow in a way myself, right? Like I went from being a hands-on in the business, kind of day-to-day part of the operations, to slowly but surely coming out of the day-to-day, still applying a lot of strategy, but getting to that point where I need to be focusing more on what the business is doing and what it can be doing, and how it shapes, and who it partners with, and all that kind of stuff. And that has taken, I think I was a CEO in training for a couple of years at like an organizational size of 12. And I think I'm back in that again now at 20, relearning what it means to be, the CEO of an organization at 20 people, and how do we create culture that we want to create, all those kind of things. So certainly there's a lot that I've had to relearn. And there's been
any other books on that front? You mentioned Scaling Up was pivotal. Any
Scaling
other
Up is one. There's a podcast that actually has been pretty awesome. It's 2 podcasts actually. So I listen to the HBR IdeaCast, and I find that those little half hour, like you just catch bits of people's wisdom. But there's been a podcast that Shane Parrish puts out, I think he's out of Ottawa, called The Knowledge Project. And I think I've listened to just about every one of them. And
he's got some books too, I think.
Yeah, he does. And his, just the wisdom, that format that he's curated, I've learned a lot, or at least learned of a lot, that I can then go digging in on my own and really, kind of, for lack of words, double click into these concepts that I just didn't know about until I hear someone else share their story. And, most recently, one of the ones I listened to is he had the founder of HubSpot on, and I was just listening to how he described his journey of growing HubSpot, and, getting to that point where, he'd kind of gone through these, ashes and phoenix, if you will, like of what the CEO role was as he grew. But then also getting to that point where, he crashed that snowmobile, I think it was, and was stuck in the wilderness didn't think he was going to make it, and how that really changed his whole approach. And so listening to people's stories like that have been awesome, and really, I think for me, very foundational. And, I think the work that Shane's doing is awesome. So I really appreciate it.
Erik, thank you so much. Everyone check out yeeboodigital.com to learn more episodes of the podcast, and we'll see everyone next time. Erik, thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like $100 grand.